Welcome, Children of Iluvatar, to our first episode of Echoes of Tolkien, where we talk all things Tolkien. I'm Ryan.
I'm Derek.
I'm Colton.
And I'm Logan.
Let's start out with the most controversial question in all of Tolkien universe. Why didn't the Eagles just take Frodo to Mount Doom to destroy the ring?
You're looking at me? You want my answer?
I mean, it'd make for really short books.
The Eagles are not Gandalf's pet. They're nobody's pet, really, other than one of the Valar. So they can't just summon these eagles whenever they want to take them wherever they want.
But don't they also have a contribution in Middle-earth or a thought process where maybe I don't want Middle-earth ruled by evil?
I don't think it's like...
I mean, Tolkien never actually wrote any answer to that specific question that people have.
I also don't think that's the most logical way to go about it.
It would not have been. It would not have been successful.
No.
Has flying creatures.
No. Explain that one. How is that not the most logical? Because I think the argument for it is that is the most logical.
Because it's not. Sauron has flying creatures himself under his power.
Okay, but let's go movie reference here. Return of the King. The Eagles in 3 seconds are like, let's kill the Nazgul. Boom.
They did show up to that last battle, didn't they?
They did.
They did.
They could have solved so many problems in Middle-earth if they would just done it.
But you couldn't have somebody riding the eagle. You also don't know what would happen if the eagle would have put on the ring.
Do we know how many eagles there are in Middle-earth?
Is there 9?
I don't know how many eagles there are.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
See, my case is, aside from just so we could extend the books and make a great books and great film, the Eagles are still the most logical choice.
It's true. But
I mean, had they been flying them, he would have had the Nazgul prepared. He'd have all his armies prepared. Mount Doom would have been heavily fortified.
and not to mention the fact that the whole idea is that Sauron needed to not see it coming.
Right.
That's why hobbits were kind of the ideal choice. They could sneak past into
That was the
Mordor.
whole point of having a company of 9.
Yeah, exactly.
And not having Elrond and Glorfindel leading them. It would have
And
been
Sauron had eyes everywhere, so if the eagles were flying straight towards Mount Doom, he'd see it coming.
Okay, but let's see. He wouldn't have time to prepare if they sporadically were like, "Hey, Eagles,
It's
let's
not
go."
just a 30-minute flight.
Okay,
either.
by Eagles' time.
I mean, fair, but
Who would have thought this podcast would start off with really just destroying the whole concept of Tolkien's books?
I think what it comes down to is with Tolkien not doing it that way is because that just makes for a complete horrible story.
It really would.
I
So
mean, maybe he should have just not included the eagles at all, and then we wouldn't have to worry about it.
yeah, I think
It still comes under the whole concept of can you really trust an eagle? Hey, deliver this ring to this volcano.
That's actually kind of a good point too, because no creature could really be trusted with the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Even some of the most powerful wizards knew they couldn't be trusted to even touch the ring.
it's fair. And interesting thing about hobbits, I think, Derek, you were saying the other day how hobbits actually can't fully grasp the temptation of the ring.
So, what makes Bilbo and Frodo, especially Frodo, the perfect ring bearer is the ring, whenever it takes possession of somebody, when it gets used for bad, it's because men, elves, any other being has an inner part of them that wants to conquer all other life. And hobbits being these laissez-faire creatures, they just
enjoy
want their
the simple pleasures of life. That's all they
tobacco,
want.
baked goods, farming,
But can you imagine the bakery that they could make with the power of the ring?
I'd go there.
Oh yeah, it'd be the best
one
biscuits of all.
cupcake to rule them all.
I actually think the funniest thing would be, could you imagine hobbits trying to rule Middle-earth? I feel like you just punt them. I mean, what kind of army would that be?
I would be curious because, after the ring is destroyed, they go back, they realize that the Shire has been, completely overrun and scorched and whatnot. They do mount up a force and fight back and take back their lands.
Wait, what do you mean? I don't remember watching that in the Peter Jackson films.
Right. So what Tolkien had, that's just that would be something that I would love to like see actually come to life.
You're talking about the scoring of the Shire.
Yeah, but so like once they return back, like this is like down the road of Sam, Mary, like they lead forces and like take back the Shire to make it what it once was. It's not just some magical place when they get back again.
Right. Although it made for a great ending, didn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean,
No, I mean that's a good point too. Is that even though they enjoy the simple pleasures, whenever Saruman, who he's I guess identifying as Sharky, when he's taking over the Shire at the end of Tolkien's book, the hobbits do stand up for like what they do love. They're willing to fight. They're willing to die to take back the Shire.
But the fight has to be brought to them.
But the fight has to be brought to them because they do 100% prefer lazying about for 100 years. And I mean, I believe if I read correctly, Tolkien identified the most with hobbits. He enjoyed the simple pleasures.
Yeah, I
pipe
do believe you.
weed, good food, relaxation,
Fun, good company.
good company.
And I think, like, to that point, like, even Galadriel, who was, like, the most hard-nosed fighter against Sauron herself, when she's offered the ring, she fails.
Yeah.
Aragorn knows, like, what his outcome would be if he took the ring. Boromir, even in the slightest, he fails. All these other creatures are just completely flawed
Right.
to have a ring. But the hobbits, even though it does wear on them,
Yeah.
and you see what happens to Smeagol, what happens to Bilbo, and even Frodo towards the end, because that draw to the ring is so strong.
And even in the books, for a little time there, it does take Sam a little bit of a minute to give back the ring to Frodo because he does feel the draw.
Yeah.
Like it is kind of amazing how a lot of people they'll rag on Frodo because towards the end he's like, I can't give this thing up, I can't destroy it, but like he carried that thing for 13 months
And
had it for many years prior, to be fair. And it wasn't until the end when he was right there in the pit of fire that like he's like, I can't do this. He held on to that ring for a long time and still didn't do anything negative really with it until the end.
And I think that's actually like part of the adaptation of the films versus the books that obviously Peter Jackson had leave out for those filming purposes, but the duration between Frodo getting the ring and then actually getting the company going.
It was 17 years, right?
17 years until he was made aware of the ring. But
Yeah,
he didn't even...
He had it in his possession for 17 years before they even set off.
Yeah, but he didn't... When he found out, he didn't just leave the Shire right then.
Right.
I mean, it took a few months. He sold Bag End,
To the Sackville Bagginses.
made like a whole other
Blasts.
alibi to why he was just
Right.
up and leaving. But something I wanted to point out, you even said, Frodo holds onto the ring there at the end, because when the ring is in like presence of Mount Doom, like where it's created, that's where it's like pull and power is the strongest.
Right.
So like if they were to take the Eagles, there's no guarantee that was going to work, because last minute anything can happen. Somebody can feel a pull, who knows how the Eagles would have responded. On top of that, so let's say you fly there, for whatever reason your mission fails, you just brought the ring to the Dark Lord.
Yep.
Yeah.
You failed.
There is a fair point, actually, I'll say, in that argument.
And always to remember, too, is like the ring's not just a ring. It's not just powerful. Like, it is sentient. It is like Sauron's soul. Like, the great portion of his soul.
Horcrux, if you would.
Exactly.
It is very much like a Horcrux.
Yeah.
The original Horcrux, I think, before those other movies came out. But like it is like, and that's why towards the end there, it said that after the ring was destroyed, like Sauron is a Maiar, right? A Maiar.
Yes, he is.
And he can, in that way, he can never completely be destroyed. But he put so much of his own being into the ring that when the ring was destroyed, he's essentially...
He's just cast into the void.
Yeah, he's cast into the
Morgoth.
void. He's a ghost that can't, regain any sort of power. He put so much of his own into the ring that once he's essentially dead because everything that he was in that ring.
Yeah.
So...
And there's... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, if you get...
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so there is an argument there, say, if the Eagles did, and if, say, the Eagles did get some form of capture from the ring, who is really going to be able to take it from the Eagles from there? So, you know what? Case settled. The books are great.
And also, depending on where they lose the ring, now it's lost again for how many years and find, and gives Sauron time to kind of
Build up his army.
defeat Middle-earth before he even gets to the ring
Yeah.
again.
Also, it's not even guaranteed that they get to Mordor with the Eagles.
Sure.
Because when they're at the Council of Elrond, at this point still Sauron does not even know where the ring is. So once a group of Eagles with a party with the One Ring starts taking flight, Sauron's going to know they can be attacked anywhere from Rivendell to Mordor. So there's just no guarantees. I know a lot of casual fans would say, well, why don't just take the Eagles? But it's just not possible. And it makes for a shit story.
I still have to be that, counterpart here that still makes the case for the Eagles, but fully recognize the logic behind not having the Eagles. But I also need to give those others a voice here. But going back into the film adaptations versus the Tolkien books, I think that a lot of fans of it have problems with a lot of Peter Jackson's adaptations based on missing out key details of the books. But in reality, when you think about how do you actually make films that go straight off the books, because there are some arguments that some Peter Jackson's adaptations are better in certain senses for, we'll say, like a video audience versus books that have to be more descriptive. I mean, the Council of Elrond chapter in the Lord of the Rings book is extremely, extremely long.
Nauseating.
A hard read. So,
I mean, the beginning in the Shire is a long time.
yeah. But
It is, and no, I understand some people's arguments with that, but I do think, it's a film medium, and I honestly think he did exceptionally well adapting those books for what are, masterpiece films. Despite what some people may have some arguments about it, even some of the more subtle changes he made, like he did a good job taking a source material and adapting it into his own version. And I think that's very important to kind of note too, is that like not all sorts of adaptions of books or older movies, anything else, need to be, completely encompassing the source material. It is an adaptation. So you can, you can love the book, you can love the movies, you can love the, old animated cartoon Lord of the Rings films, which I do. But they are their own adaptations.
let me just the live action beats those cartoons any day of the
Oh,
week.
it beats it.
Uh,
But
it does, but
okay.
they're great.
They're great. Okay. Please assign great. Are we talking about the music or Aragorn in the film running around with his sword
With his
claiming
little
he's king?
short skirt.
Yeah, exactly.
That's hot.
It is hot. I mean, Vigo or cartoon version, I'll pick Vigo any day.
That's actually a good point for what I find to be a better character development story that Peter Jackson changed from the books. I think the Reluctant King is such a better story for Aragorn than someone, from the get-go is already gunning for the position. He's already ready to go. He's like, I am, the king of Gondor. Like,
Yeah, no,
I would agree.
Yeah.
Like you said, obviously for a film adaptation, they got to change some things. Yeah. But something they totally changed with Aragorn's storyline, I think, is way more. It's way more compelling, captivating. And I'm not trying to say Tolkien failed there either.
Not at all.
I just think to have this guy who is reluctant to take up the crown, and he knows the downfall of his own family's lineage, and that's just more of a captivating, more relatable story, I think, than always carrying around the shards of Narsil and showing people.
Yeah, I feel like the general consensus of people seeing that would actually think that he came from the loony bin, running around claiming to be king. So I think Peter Jackson's adaptation of the humble king, I think, plays better with a mass audience.
And as far as like Elrond bringing it to him, and then having to go to the Dead Men of Dunharrow, like that's cooler than like already leaving Rivendell with it already reforged.
Right after the Council of Elrond, he's already got his sword reforged. He's ready to go. I think getting it there towards the end was a better call too for a film adaptation. Like I understand where Tolkien was going with his adaptation of it.
In a book, he can flesh that out more.
He can, exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of the movies, Colton, what are we smoking?
So today we got two options. we have one of Tolkien's favorites, which would be Capstan Blue, Flake, Virginia. And the other one we'd have would be Peter Stokeby's 24 Nugent, which is primarily what they smoked on set, along with other aromatics.
I'm just thinking that everyone on set was probably just smoking all day long.
I don't know.
I mean, you were in the beautiful outdoors of New Zealand. I mean,
that is true. And I think
I can see Viggo Mortensen really taking like a love to pipe tobacco.
Oh, 100%.
I can see what I think I appreciate about the whole cast and crew of the Lord of the Rings trilogy is everyone's buy-in to, I'll say, the truth of Tolkien, but how they just embrace the characters, because I really think that translates on the screen itself. I think that if you just had actors who really didn't care about the role, I don't think it would come off how it did, but you really got the buy-in from the actors on the screen.
Oh, 100%.
Sir Ian McKellen for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
He dove into the books.
Yeah, Ian McKellen and obviously Christopher Lee, really, and everybody really, I feel like just did a great job at their adaptation of characters and diving into the true nature of the character, as well as obviously taking the direction of Peter Jackson's direction for the character for the
and their
film.
commitment. You know, filming all 3 movies in a row, they're just saying, "Hey, you're going to be doing this for a while. We're not sure if it's going to be successful." Until after, obviously, the Fellowship of the Ring came out, everyone loved it, and so it's like, okay, we're going to keep doing this. But they were filming back to back to back, and just living in New Zealand basically for what is it, like 3 to 4 years?
Long time. I mean, it's a huge chunk of your life.
It is, and I think first off, the timeline on filming something on location like that with so many different scenes, so many different sets, just dedication of the crew to really make sure that everything gets pulled off there. I mean, it's just such a strict, high demanding filming schedule.
Yeah. Lots and lots of practical effects in those movies too.
I don't know if this is true, but I did see the other day that apparently, and if it is true, that's so cool, Christopher Lee, on the day he died, rewatched the films.
Really?
I don't know if that is true or not.
I did see a headline on that. I can't fact check it at this moment, but yeah, I'm not sure, but that would be pretty cool.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Have you seen, I'm sure you guys have seen, where they were going to film where Grima stabs Sauron in the back, and they wanted him to kind of like shriek more.
Mm-hmm.
And Christopher Lee's like, no, that's not what it sounds like when you stab a human.
Yeah.
and
He's like, I know.
I was going to say, how does he know?
Props to Peter Jackson as the director, was like, you know more than me. Like, you make it more accurate.
Yeah. And
just subtle stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And then giving the actors that freedom to really, like I said, when you're dedicated to a film like that as an actor, you take on the role yourself where, like, you essentially make it your life. So giving them that creative freedom, I think, was also beneficial for the film to really 100%. Just do their own thing. Every time I think, like, watch the behind the scenes, I laugh every time they're doing the boats and Frodo's, I'll say miniature, who didn't swim, and Viggo telling the story about Viggo, I can't swim, and he's like, what? And he said when he was filming, he was just so nervous to make any movements on the boat because, like, he goes, save yourself.
I remember so many days staying homesick from school, and like I would throw in the extra the other DVDs were just like all behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah,
those provided like such entertainment and insight as a young fan.
Yeah. It's funny when you say DVDs because now that we're in streaming. But when these came out, we still had VHSs, and I remember swapping them out as a kid. And that's like the first experiences.
Yeah. I guess if you don't have those DVDs, you can't find them now.
Really?
It'd probably be pretty difficult to find.
I mean,
expensive,
YouTube,
probably.
I guess, but like it's not like you can buy a streaming version and it has that included.
Yeah, not as many as there were. I mean, I think that's another thing that was really well done with the Lord of the Rings. Like, they didn't hold back. They put a lot of features into that.
Oh, yeah. I would say they probably have the best behind the scenes. As its own production of itself.
Just the Weta Workshop itself.
Right.
Weta Workshop is amazing in what they created. Even their miniatures. So anytime in the film when you'd see like the big castles or anything like that, you'd have these 30-foot structures of foam or clay or what it may be molded for those long shots. And typically in film, you have to do like quick few seconds so you can't see the imperfections.
Right.
They would do 1 to 2 minute shots of these castles running through with their cameras because they were just so confident in their work, and it totally played in the movie.
And more so now, everything's just CGI.
Yeah.
Which speaks to the great work of Peter Jackson in the whole film. Even Isengard, that whole set was built as a miniature, and the
Right.
mines that they dug, and when they had the scene where the crows come back,
Right.
like they had to shoot that going down into the mines, the tunnels, going through like,
In one shot.
in one shot.
Yeah.
yeah, it's nobody would ever do that. Nobody would invest the time and money in that now.
No.
No.
And I think
Heck, they didn't even do it.
yeah. I think that goes to speaking the differences between CGI and just straight live action with props. Is The Hobbit is probably the biggest controversy in that is the use of heavy CGI and their studios. I know there's some on location, but it was definitely a change in feel, in my opinion, of it. I don't want to hate on the Hobbit movies because I do think that they're good in their own. But when you're comparing to Lord of the Rings, I don't think they hold that same standard.
Right.
Um,
I mean, and Peter Jackson for years didn't want to do them. By the time they finally convinced him, he had a very short amount of
Well,
time.
they had
to
already
get him running.
started without him.
Yeah, they were
They
started
had to bring
without
him in to kind of salvage.
I can't remember how many months he had, but he didn't have many months to like get it together and shoot that first film. And I think after that, it was just like, let's just get this done. I mean, I think that's, that's my thought process. He's probably like, let's just knock these out of here. Because, I mean, for years, he just
But-
didn't want to do them. And I understand.
Like Christopher Lee didn't film any of his parts with anyone,
yeah.
and Gandalf. Maybe you guys have seen the clip too, where he kind of has a breakdown
Right.
Yeah.
in the. It was in Bag End, I think.
Yeah, it was.
A green screen Bag End.
Yeah, and he was
Yeah.
filming by himself, and he's just like, this is not what I got into acting, to do.
Yeah, just completely different feel. And I think it's also hard to buy into the characters in The Hobbit as well as Lord of the Rings. I can't exactly tell you why, but the character development in The Hobbit, like if you look back on that movie, I mean, you have Martin Freeman who played Bilbo, who, standout character. Obviously, Ian McKellen, you already still had that
Right.
nostalgia feel for.
I did
And-
like his portrayal of Bilbo. I thought he did a pretty
Yeah.
excellent job.
Yeah, he did. I did this thing. It's hard because when you look back on the film, you're like, what characters really stood out to me? Which ones do you remember that you go back and
Right.
when you have Aragorn, Legolas, you put the posters of them on your wall, you get all excited, and really you just didn't have that same feel with the Hobbit.
Those original character posters were hot.
they were.
They were.
I mean, I would say obviously Ian McKellen's portrayal of Gandalf in The Hobbit is still just as good as Lord
yeah.
of the Rings version. Yeah, the Bilbo casting was phenomenal. Those scenes with him are the best. I do like Balin.
Yeah.
I
Balin
think
was
that
good.
actor did a good job. But other than that, the other dwarves, there's character
And
arcs.
and,
Like
and-
there's no character development.
And
with any of
frankly, a
them.
lot of their costume design too, I was just not a big fan of. It didn't feel,
Didn't feel dwarvish.
yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
feel authentic to me.
So I 100% agree with that in regards to when you think of dwarves. Half of them didn't feel like dwarves, and I think where the film had to do something is if you made them all look like Gimlis or something like that, you wouldn't be able to differentiate them on screen.
That's fair.
No, it's generally like a very hard decision to make because I remember when the concept art came out and the costumes, and I was like, what are they doing? Like they're ruining dwarves, which there can still be an argument for it. But when you actually do the practicality of like, okay, if we had 9 Gimlis or what it may be on screen, you wouldn't know who is who.
I was about to make an argument about the Rings of Power because I actually think they do dwarves pretty well. But you are right. When you've got that many dwarves being main characters, it would be hard to differentiate because I couldn't.
But so to go on that, you got Bofer, who looks like a Russian, Eskimo or something like
Right.
that. You got Feely and Keely, who are these like
GQ models.
Yeah, GQ models.
Thorin is like this Aragorn dwarf. It's like the cool dwarves they made human-like.
Right.
And
And
I
then the
think-
comedic relief ones.
but like
Yeah.
Rings of Power's credit, the dwarves do feel like dwarves.
Yes.
That's
They
fair.
look like dwarves, but they don't have to be GQ.
Right.
They don't have to be met like.
But then
there,
again,
there was a recipe there, and I just feel like
Right.
the Hobbit films did not follow that.
But
Yeah.
then again, Rings of Power also only has like 4 main character dwarves. And their looks are, different enough, but like if we were to put, like 12 dwarves as like main casting, all right, maybe their concept and design on Rings of Power, maybe I would have trouble differentiating.
Yeah, I just felt, and the Hobbit book is a lot more childish and comical
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
in comparison, and so a lot of the dwarves in the movie are kind of these goofy features. But You could have kept like a bigger beard. They could all have individual looks of beards.
Right.
They could have all had more of a bigger nose. You know, you've got the GQ models who have human, like Feely or Keely.
Keely is the I would consider the one who
He's the sexy one.
Yeah,
Yeah, he has no dwarven features other
At
than
all.
he's short.
and
Yeah.
they tried doing the love interest with him and the elf,
Yeah,
which I'm
that
not
one
saying would
still
never
hurts me.
happen. I'm just saying
That's what grinds my gears. So they have this Toriel, who's the elf, and they have like this love interest almost, love triangle, even with Legolas involved.
For
But
some
like the
reason.
scene where they're putting him in the prison, he's like, "You didn't check my trousers. There could be anything in there," and she's like, "Or nothing." It's like I don't think Tolkien wanted a dick joke
No,
in his stuff.
probably not, and neither did I.
Yeah, the Hobbit, like I said, I think they're good films in their own right, but when you actually compare the whole, like, Peter Jackson's previous films, and like we mentioned earlier, to his credit, he didn't want to make them, and I think probably because he knew, like, everyone would tear them apart because the way the studios moved, also, I think he knew he wouldn't be able to make them how he wanted to make them
yeah.
as well.
It wasn't his commitment to make them. He
No.
just kind of took over.
I mean, it really
Yeah.
goes on to the production studio
Yeah.
because The Hobbit's a shorter book, and they're like, let's make money off this and make it
Right.
3
Yeah.
films. You know, so they had to add stuff, stretch things out. I was disappointed when the films came out.
Right.
I've come to accept them for what they are now.
They're entertaining, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But some of the things I do like is I do like that they do mention the Necromancer and Dol Guldur,
Right.
you know, and
I think
casting
this,
him out. Like, that's stuff that is in the Tolkien universe, and they dove into that. Whether it really fits these films,
Or that it,
That's
or
up for
whether it
debate.
was done properly.
right, that's up for debate, but I can accept and appreciate diving into some of that lore.
Absolutely.
yeah, I think the Dol Guldur scenes in The Hobbit are actually probably what stand out most to me as the best scenes, because it does dive into that darker feel of films and what's really going on. And it's kind of setting the stage for the
Right.
Lord of the Rings that's going out. And I appreciate, I'll say, like the Ian McKellen scenes. I mean, I'm just always biased toward Ian McKellen,
course.
and you have Galadriel, and it's very interesting when you watch the extended versions of it because it gives such a longer, scenes for Dol Guldur. In fact, I think it's Thorne's dad.
Yes.
His dad. That's in that one. And in the actual theatrical version, that's completely cut out. But you still have scenes where Gandalf is actually doing the scenes in the theatrical version, but he's not in them.
Right.
Yeah, it's actually very funny when you watch the extended
A
versions.
little bizarre.
Yeah. But just like anything, even Lord of the Rings extended versions, when you become a fan, you can't watch theatrical versions because you literally feel like you're missing out.
Right.
Yeah. You can't watch the
Some people
anymore.
argue the pacing, everything. I never thought there was an issue with it.
Yeah.
I thought the extended versions were done, fairly well.
I could just be too big of a nerd. I don't care
Right.
as much about the pacing. The extendeds are about
Yeah.
the only way to watch them.
I will say something that I absolutely do hate about The Hobbit, and it has nothing to do with the actor. I think he's a fantastic actor, but Radagast is just awful.
I think they did ruin Radagast for me. And I like darker feels. I like more serious vibes in movies. That's me. But Radagast, I really couldn't take seriously. And for me, I'm like, when
there's
you're
bird shit in his hair. I mean,
yeah, exactly, yeah. But you get the wizards to me are supposed to be like these wise and just captivating people, or wizards
and
rather.
I mean, I understand like their concept is like, oh well, he is like more in like the nature of Middle Earth, but like I mean, yeah, but you don't have to. He doesn't have to be gross.
Doesn't have to
Yeah.
be gross.
He could have been a
Radagast
hippie, but like
was a strange individual.
that's
though.
true.
And I think Sauron even touches on that about
He does.
he's kind of like a fool.
Yeah.
But he was the wizard that was part of the Astari. He went there and he neglects his task too. He just totally falls in love with the creatures and nature of Middle Earth, and that's what he did invest all of his time into.
Well, yes, still think a fail. But no, I think that's where the biggest thing for me, that it was just, I hate saying a letdown. I hate saying how films are let down, but I think though, as a fan, you're just happy to see more content, because I do think
anytime.
to hate everything that isn't the books and things like that is not okay as a fan, because you really want the universe to be expanded, whether you like it or not. Just like Rings of Power, there's a lot we can talk on. I'm sure we will at some point on Rings of Power. But a lot of people are hating on Rings of Power, and trust me, first season was rough. Second season was a little bit better. But at the end of the day, it is more Lord of the Rings content or Tolkien content that you can keep expanding. And I think that's good for the fan base to keep it alive, keep Tolkien alive.
Yeah, and I think, warming up to Rings of Power goes back to adaptions. It's like once I can get my brain into the idea that, adaptions are adaptions. It doesn't have to be completely correct to the source material. I started definitely looking at Rings of Power a lot differently. I think they are doing an excellent job. I think the effects are pretty well done. I think most of the acting is pretty well done. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do further with that as well. I hope they go through with all 5 seasons because
I think they have to. I think they have to go through with all 5 seasons at this point. I do think they almost need it to become a bingeable show. Obviously, I think they spent $250 million just for the rights to do the show. And the show's supposed to be based on, obviously, Second Age. And I think a lot of fans, which I was like this in the beginning, and then, like Logan said, getting to the point where we wrap your head around, like, this is an adaptation. Second Age is thousands of years. These events take place within thousands of years.
Right.
You can't really draw out a show, for 1,000 years. So having to really cram this material. And in reality, Tolkien doesn't have as much writing on the Second Age. So there's a lot of filler points that they have to use in here, which is guesswork. And there are a lot of, I'll say, contradictions in Rings of Power to Tolkien's writings. But I think when you just look at it as this is just new material, new content for Tolkien's works, you become more warm to it.
I think it also provides an opportunity to bring in new and young fans. I mean, the films are about 20 years old at this point, so it's not as relevant. The books have been around, obviously, when The Hobbit came out, 30s. So, I mean, they've been around for a while, but the movie's been out for 20 years. So to make things more relevant, you can draw maybe some new fans in through Rings of Power. I enjoy Rings of Power. Like, obviously, I'm okay with the adaptation. Things are crammed.
Yeah.
Timelines kind of have to.
Elrond kissed his mother-in-law.
I mean,
Weird stuff.
I mean, is his mother-in-law good looking?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and it may create controversy, but the first season of Rings of Power, Galadriel was unbearable, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Unbearable. I actually really hated her character. Second season, they toned her down a bit.
They gave her less to do as well.
Where they made her seem more like a rational, the Galadriel and yes, that's thousands of years prior to the Galadriel from the Lord of the Rings books. But I think the first season, she just seemed like this irrational person. In season 2, they kind of really honed her in. And Charlie Vickers, who plays Sauron, I think he really made his character come life in season 2. I think he really
Anatar
took
was a badass. I liked him.
Yeah.
Well, since we're touching into Sauron, I have a little bit of a theory myself.
Okay.
Rings of Power theory?
Yes. We have this dark wizard in the East, where the show has yet to name who he is.
If that's Saruman, no.
Well, I have a thought that maybe it's not.
Okay.
Even though there's a couple clues saying it might be Saruman.
Yeah.
And that's not factual. We do know. All right, so what if the Dark Wizard is actually Sauron? So nothing in the show says that the two stories we're seeing right there are happening at the same time, for one.
Okay.
2, we know Sauron did go into the East. He caused a lot of mischief in Rune, got armies in Rune. Also, these skeleton riders that we saw, they had this eye marking on all their stuff.
The ones that had no character adaptation.
The ones that had
you thought they were going to, and then all of a sudden they just died in 30 seconds in the episode. Yeah,
and
them.
when the stranger, Gandalf, is speaking with Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadil talks about his purpose here is to fight Sauron and the Dark Wizard.
Right.
So I'm just wondering, what if this Dark Wizard is one of Sauron's disguises, one of his forms he takes in the East? Because it doesn't make sense that it would be Sauron, unless they're just totally gonna break.
It doesn't, and that's my fear, is that it's gonna be Saruman. And the only reason I say is when and this could be looking into set design and dress, is they have the same shading on the beard.
They were definitely trying to make us believe something.
Yeah, they're trying to make us
just
believe
like
it
they
for
did
sure.
with Grand Elf.
Yeah. Yes.
Bye, Gandalf.
But I'll say Tom Bombadil. Well done.
Well done.
Well done.
Yeah, I enjoyed their... What's his name? Rainier?
Sounds about right.
Tom Rainier, something like that. He does, yeah.
Yeah.
I think his portrayal is good. He's
Yeah.
got that cheery, that warm feeling.
And again, nothing against Tolkien's work, but like it's nice to have Tom Bombadil do something, you know.
It is nice to actually see some form of adaptation. Obviously, Tom Bombadil has been left out of any other works
Right.
prior other than Tolkien's writings.
It was
So-
bold of Amazon to take on Tom Bombadil.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it is an intriguing and difficult character.
Could have went really bad, but
Could
I
have
think
gone
they did
very
well.
bad, but I thought they did well. I would have liked to seen a blue coat,
You know.
but
I think that has been the reception of the fans as well. I think Tom Bombadil overall has been well received. I think the Gandalf story and whether we want to dispute over if Gandalf should be there by now, all that stuff, that's just an argument, but it is in the show. That's Gandalf. I do think that they are working well on his character development, however,
I agree.
and the portrayal is good for like a young Gandalf coming to Middle Earth and kind of like really growing as a character. I am happy that there was some separation between him and the Harfoots.
Yeah,
Mainly,
thank God.
yeah. I think the Harfoot storyline is kind of
It's weak.
slow.
so
But
do we
it
think
does
they're-
show his connection to the halflings.
It does.
Yeah, it does. And I think you're correct there. It does show where he got that warmth and that connection from his beginning stages in Middle Earth.
So do we think that now they're kind of maybe pushing them off? You don't think we're done with them, or
No, we're not. They
no.
said they are doing more character development,
they
at
are?
least in
Okay.
like after credit scenes. They've mentioned like
I
character
mean,
development.
I'm okay if they want to keep going with how they settle and
I'm assuming that's probably where they're going to go. They're going to go off and maybe establish the Shire at some point.
and I'm okay with that.
I am too.
It's just it might
Just
not
keep
be the
it-
most compelling of all the
Yeah.
storylines going on in Rings
Keep
of
it in the
Power.
background of the storylines.
I think they need to really get their storyline figured out with Numenor. Numenor is such a cool aspect of the books.
And it's
and
been a
they're
letdown
right.
at this point, kind of, in
It
my
has.
opinion.
It's
There hasn't been enough
slow.
time. There hasn't been enough development.
I think they got to take Sauron there in season 3
They do.
Yeah.
because, like we kind of spoke about, Charlie Vickers was like the star of season 2.
Yeah.
He took down a Region. I'd love to see his storyline in Numenor, and kind of hope they do stay true to the canon stories.
And it seems like they may be heading that direction for season 3. It seems like they're
A
getting
little bit. They
more
laid a
into
little bit
the-
groundwork there.
Right.
It's actually funny as you see the character developments now and stuff like that, and we have 2 seasons behind us going into a season 3, assuming next year. And we're like, oh, they have to get 5 seasons done. Now I'm like, well, I feel like they could just keep going with this and keep
Right.
making new content, which I hope is the case. I hope Amazon ends up, obviously everything has to end up being profitable. I'm hoping this ends up
Right.
being profitable and worthwhile doing for them, because I see that being the only way we get more content. Jumping into that, I know they're also making some more movies. They have The War of the Rohirrim, which is more anime style. That's not my type.
I'm interested.
yeah.
I like anime well enough, and I think based on what I'm seeing from the trailers, it's looking like a well done. It's looking like a well done movie. And just it being connected to Peter Jackson's trilogy and its aesthetic and its designs, like that gets me a little excited.
I will say I don't see at this point how anyone really can fully pull away from the Lord of the Rings trilogy set designs and designs for things, because it's so well done. I feel like
Yeah.
everyone, there is no beating it.
No, it's perfection.
I think we're Amazon, actually, the one thing that they really did steer away from is the wargs.
They do look very different.
Yeah,
Like a raccoon with rabies.
yeah, kind of like our
Not that it looks bad, but it does look different than
Yeah.
the.
Who has the production rights for the War of the Rohirrim?
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd have to look that one.
I mean,
up.
I'm not an anime fan myself, but I crave Tolkien content, so
Yeah.
I'll go watch the film and I
Support
hope
it.
it's good.
And support it. I mean, the more that the fans get support these or these movies and shows, the more content that will be made.
Oh, absolutely.
And some will be great, some might not be as great, but the more content gets out there, the better it is for all us fans.
Is any of us actually here excited for the hunt for Gollum?
I think if they focus less on Gollum and maybe like some other storylines.
I don't know who was asking for that film.
I think Andy Serkis is. I think that's pretty.
Yeah, I love Andy Serkis. I
I
love
do.
him. He is the best adaptation of Gollum anyone could ever do. The problem I have with it is just like the game. They did that game that was based around Gollum, and I'm like,
And nobody wants. I think Gollum's story has been told well enough. I don't really think.
And it's not that gripping of a like.
no,
It's important to the whole entire
Right.
story.
yeah.
And to the destruction of the ring, but I don't know anybody who's craving more Smeagol content.
There's also that fan film of The Hunt for Gollum.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's
Which-
that
I
does
haven't
a good
watched that
job.
in years.
I haven't watched that
I think
since
it's pretty
I
well
was in-
done for
Yeah.
what it is.
I can't imagine what fans could do with the technology we have today with fan films for Lord of the Rings.
Oh.
I just fear,
Is anybody still making fan films?
No, they'll get sued.
So that's where we're at with that. You can't make fan films for Lord of the Rings anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
I just, and this might be controversial to the fandom, but like to bring a Viggo Mortensen, and I've seen like Orlando Bloom maybe has some interest, and Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen could probably still play Gandalf because he's just always been an older character.
Right.
But now you're bringing in a 20-plus-year-old Viggo Mortensen
Right.
to when the initial films came out, and he's got to be a prequel to all of that. And I don't think the de-aging technology is there enough. Like, I just fear
I
that
think
Even
it
if
is now.
It's expensive.
No, here's the thing. I think it is now. The de-aging a few years ago wasn't, but they've now implemented to where I think it'll work. Again, I actually agree with it in principle, but I think that they're going to be able to pull it off. But even when you have,
It would be nice to see the same actors like maintaining those roles,
Right.
and bring that same kind
for
of
sure.
personality
But that's
to it.
kind of more to why it's like, I don't need this film.
Yeah, I was about to say, is it worth the cost for a film nobody wants?
And then I mean, I'm not a CGI guy.
I agree.
So I fear it's going to be another show with a ton of CGI,
Right.
which really pulls me out of it.
It does.
I mean, to rewatch the Lord of the Rings films again,
That
I mean-
still hold weight.
oh yeah.
20 years, they still hold that
Amazing.
same
but
weight.
like the
Timeless.
attire, the scenes,
Yeah.
just everything built into it
They
makes
went
it
all out on
it makes it
everything.
a believable movie. Like you
Yeah.
can think that this is a real place.
Immerse yourself in it. You're
the
in
Hobbit,
that world.
you don't like
No.
the CGI. To me, draws me right out of it.
yeah.
I think Rings of Power isn't the CGI
They're
is
not
as
too bad.
No,
Yeah, no.
They
That,
do a
But
lot.
I guess that goes into the modern technologies we have now. The CG in that show does look pretty great.
much
yeah.
better.
But
Yeah.
to your point, I'll even say like Orlando Bloom, who plays Legolas, obviously in Lord of the Rings, and then also The Hobbit. Orlando Bloom looks older in The Hobbit, and that's a prequel.
Yeah.
But
You
I
know
get,
who looks better though? Hugo Weaving. He looks better in The Hobbit than he did in The Lord of the Rings.
that's fair.
It's because it's the Matrix.
No.
Yeah, there you go. No, I say The Hunt for Gollum, for them spending money on that, it's a little bit disappointing. And I again, not to like dive into it, but I think legally, depending on who owns production rights, they might have to stick with Third Age. I'm not sure what all they're allowed to do, but I still feel like there's better things they could do with even Third Age content.
I agree. I do think I do think it's probably like Andy's pet project, and I'm like okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll do a good job, and I'm sure I'm going to watch it, and there's going to be things about it that I love.
I don't think anybody could try tackling like, well, the Silmarillion as a whole, but the creation of Arda and all that.
Oh, that would be
like,
tough.
No, nobody
Yeah.
could create that or produce it or portray it well.
Could you imagine though how awesome it would be? I'm sorry, if we get some First Age material.
I think there's plenty of first age material somebody can go after.
Yeah,
Right.
I think if they really, like I said, and this is why it's important for fans to like keep supporting Tolkien's works, is because if we can get to the point where we get that First Age material of the creation of Middle Earth, it can be so endless in what we could get.
We
And
get
I think
some
the
Morgoth.
First Age, yeah,
The
Morgoth.
Morgoth stuff. There's so much there.
And that's still completely owned by the Tolkien estate, right?
I would imagine.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
But man,
Eventually.
they got some cool stories.
They do. And getting that Silmarillion, the Silmarillion type story out there would be awesome.
I mean, they're touching on it. You know, even in Rings of Power, they're like nudging something.
I think they're
Imagine
allowed
where
to.
they
I
can.
think they're allowed to say his name,
right.
but that's about it. Like they can't show him. I think season 1 we have a shadowy figure at the very beginning. You're
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think like that's legally about all they can touch on Morgoth.
Which is a shame because the way they're doing Rings of Power, I'm like they could do something pretty good with all that. Maybe they'll soften up and give away a little more rights down the road.
Yeah, we'll see. The Tolkien estate.
If Rings of Power does really well, like they've got nothing but money to make. So
That's true, and that's why I get those streaming hours in. But
I really enjoy though in Rings of Power season 2 that first episode with Sauron, like Morgoth's dead. I'm now your leader. I'm now your only hope. The orcs resist it, end up killing him. Like I enjoy watching them show all of that, how he comes back to a human form, and they bring it back around to how he ended up on a raft in season 1,
Right.
like out in the water. Like it was kind of see them connect all those dots.
it was a good summary of it. I thought that portion for me, I know you really liked it because we had this conversation. I thought it was a little bit slow. By the way, just spoilers for everyone when we talk about these shows. But I thought that was a little slow, but I do agree with you now, like hindsight looking back at it, I'm like, okay, now that I knew where it was leading, it like made more sense. When I was first watching that episode, I was like, please,
It was also kind
please
of
don't
cool
be another
to
slow
see
season. Yeah.
Sauron had a different human-looking
Right.
form.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of
It,
interesting.
it kind of like, it's kind of the hint that he can take multiple forms, whenever he wants, really.
And
Maybe
that's
I was just confused, I guess. That's why I just was watching confused.
You were like, who the heck's this guy?
That's exactly what
And
it
I'm
was.
sure they'll use Charlie Vickers going on, but I'd be curious, like, would they use a different form when he goes back to Numenor?
I'm very curious about that myself. I think we talked about that a little bit.
I mean, if he's more of an Anatar-looking figure, like, I guess they can portray that that's different because Charlie Vickers was there as Sauron,
Right.
Halbrand, in
Right.
season 1. And I've seen people online being like, he's already been there, they'll recognize him. It's like, how much are they really going to recognize him? He was there for, like...
he pulled
And he
it-
wasn't like a big,
Right.
And he pulled it off with Celebrimbor with his
Celebrimbor, by the way, fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic.
I wasn't so sure about him in season 1 because I was like, this guy looks a little strange for an elf, but he won me over in season 2. I was like, this
Good
is
actor. What's his name? Anyone know?
Not off the top of my
not
head.
Off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I will
Good
say,
job.
Great job.
I think it would be a disservice, though. I get the whole concept of having multiple actors, but I think there would be so much controversy from a fan base to have two different actors playing Sauron, things like that. I think it'd almost tear it apart.
It would be
and
confusing, I'm sure.
yeah.
for
It'd almost be
people.
like
And Charlie-
Team Edward and Team Jacob type stuff, just with the same character.
And Charlie Vickers is already like knocking it out of the park. I'm like, I do not want to see anybody else play Sauron.
He was. I wasn't sold in season 1. Season 2, I'm sold.
I agree.
Yeah.
Like Halbrand, I still think he did good as Halbrand, but when he was playing Anatar,
I mean, it was
like,
fine
okay.
at first. I didn't catch on to he was Sauron from the beginning.
I didn't at the beginning.
It wasn't
either, no.
until, I guess, the end of season 1.
I thought they were
where-
just making
Well,
another Aragorn-esque character.
That's
and I'm
what
like,
I was
okay.
fearing, because they're like,
Yeah.
this is this heir king to these Southlands or whatever. And, I'm
And
like,
then we find out he's Sauron. I'm like, okay, he's kind of hot.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, maybe that's also why it was
I'd be
slower.
dark side.
Yeah. Maybe that's why actually season 1 with him was the character development was so slow because the show kept dragging on who
Right.
these characters were because they wanted you to believe the stranger was Sauron, then is Halbrand Sauron? Like they kept wanting the viewers to guess at it. So that's actually probably why I wasn't so bought in at first because you're like, who is this guy?
Right.
So you couldn't really get that full character development. But once that character could be embraced as Sauron, I mean, it just went great from there.
It was great from there.
I think the Adar character has been pretty cool.
I thought he was pretty cool too. I wish they would have done more with him.
He was actually supposed to die right away in the second season. But then the fans wanted him have the story development, and that is what they gave him, and that's
Well,
why.
maybe they should have just killed him off in the first episode then, because they didn't really develop him too much in
Yeah.
season 2.
And
But
I was a
he
little
was great.
confused in season 2 because I felt like they were bringing some kind of like love interest a little bit between him and Galadriel.
Right.
So I was wondering, like, was he going to then become Celeborn, her husband?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that was the avenue they were going.
I'm glad they
And he
didn't.
was healing, like his scars and
Right.
deformation was
It's like,
healing.
oh shit,
Yeah.
he's beautiful.
So I was like, is this gonna become Celeborn? But
But no.
I was glad they didn't go that route,
Yeah.
and I didn't want Galadriel working with like an orc army.
Yeah.
That whole that was getting a little into the weeds there, but
Yeah, it would have. It almost feels. I don't want to say contradictory because in reality, there's a lot of leeway in Second Age material, but that would have been a stretch.
definitely would have been a stretch.
Yeah, I actually think the fight between Galadriel and Sauron at the end was a little.
It was too wordy.
Well, I'll say this.
I just wasn't buying that scene.
Yeah. Also, spoiler alert is like her falling off the cliff and essentially, I'm gonna call it resurrecting practice. I was like, come on. I was like,
Yeah, I just wasn't a fan of that entire scene.
no,
Yeah.
no.
As much as I was a fan of season 2, that scene I didn't care.
Yeah.
I also it completely eluded me that scene there towards the end is going to be Rivendell. That threw me off. I was reading about it later and I was like, oh yeah, I guess that is what that is. Okay.
Yeah, they didn't make it clear.
They
I
didn't really
think
make it clear, but now I get it.
Yeah. But no, I think the more content we can get, honestly, the better. I know we can sit here and like we can pick apart, nitpick as everything, and everyone has their own opinions. You have people who prefer The Hobbit over Lord of the Rings, film wise.
Who?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, if you're out there, comment. Make your argument.
Don't stay in the shadows.
Yeah. There you go.
If you comment something we don't like, we will talk about it.
That is very true. That looks like a great time to actually end this one, and we'll catch you guys next week.